As we go into a bit of a Justin Fields conversation, because there has been all sorts of talk about him plummeting down the draft board and seems to be based on all these mock drafts. And shoot, there's now about 27 quarterbacks better than him, apparently. At what point do you guys kind of let that go in regards to Ohio State following the football talent out the door at Ohio State while you guys are trying to keep track of basketball and the current football team, but you got the NFL draft? You guys pretty much take the approach, Tony, to take it to the NFL draft and then kind of let them loose and kind of keep track to a certain extent?
I keep an eye on it. I haven't written about it yet. Like once the draft happens, yeah, well, I'll do that, or maybe go to the combine in years where there would be one. But I don't get into although it's more of a column than a news thing, just the number of people picking apart Justin Fields. But in terms of just covering it, no, I maybe I should do more of it. But with spring going on and basketball going on, maybe if I wasn't also doing basketball, I would be doing more NFL draft stuff. But I do follow it. I enjoy it. I just I don't know if we want to go into this right now, but with Fields, the way he's being picked apart, and I saw somebody posted about Chris Sims having Kellen Mond ahead of Justin Fields. I don't know where it goes on the leaderboard of quarterbacks, but at some point they stop looking at all of the bad stuff. Like Justin Fields, they look at all of the bad stuff so they can move him down. But then you get to Kellen Mond and you're like, well, look at all the good stuff he could do. And it's like, but and I've seen a little bit of Kellen Mond. I've seen a lot of bad stuff. At what point do I think you ignore the stuff that Kellen Mond does poorly because you like the stuff he does well, and the stuff that he does well moves him up. But I will tell you this, Justin Fields does a lot more stuff well than he does poorly, but for some reason the stuff that he does poorly is pulling him down. So I don't know like why at what point do you like, oh, I like this guy's upside, and that is more than, oh, I just don't know. Justin Fields sure locks onto his first receiver, and it's like, well, yes, because it's Chris Olave and he's running 40 yards downfield and Fields can throw it 60. So yeah, he's going to be looking for a little bit. And then Chris Olave always gets open a lot. So yes, there's going to be some time there, but it's just interesting to me the way Justin Fields is being picked apart. And I've even got, scouts in my DM saying, yeah, he's not that good. He's not this, he's not that. And I just, for some people, you look for the stuff that you don't like, and other quarterbacks, you look for the stuff you do like and ignore the stuff that you don't like because I think I don't know if it's bias or what, but like, what is it about one quarterback where the upside is more important than another quarterback's?
There's some Dwayne Haskins hangover there too, I think, because Dwayne didn't pan out in his first run in the NFL, and I think that there are going to be people that are going to hold that against not only Justin Fields but any Ohio State quarterback until somebody really breaks through. I mean, Ohio State has not produced those NFL quarterbacks through the years in terms of successful, fruitful careers. I mean, you could sit there and say, well, Mike Tomczak, he was on a championship team, and then of course, I mean, Art Schlichter before everything truly came to light there, but there haven't been a ton of Ohio State successful quarterbacks in the league. But I have the Chris Sims list in front of me, and as much as I want to take it to task over having Justin Fields behind Kellen Mond, him having Zach Wilson ahead of Sunshine is an issue for me too. So, and of course, one of his compatriots is out there. It's like, well, you remember this time that Chris Sims was right? Well, blind squirrel, acorn, all of that, all that garbage out there too. But it's a curious list looking there because Justin Fields was going to be, he was competing with Trevor Lawrence for the one spot, and then it was pretty much determined that, all right, it was going to be Lawrence in the 1 and Fields in the 2, and now you've got people that are trying to move Fields down to 7 or to 10 or whatnot, and you have to wonder, just a lot of times too, that you hear this posturing. It's kind of like watching American Pickers, and they find that barn find of a Chevrolet out there, and they're like, oh well, that's dented a little bit, and that's only because they're just trying to drive the price down so they can come in and swoop in and get them. I'm not concerned about what Justin Fields' future is going to be in terms of the NFL. I've seen enough. I think that where he differs just from a standpoint of numbers from Dwayne Haskins is Dwayne Haskins was only a starter for 1 year, whereas Justin Fields was truly a starter for 2 years. And there's just, a major uptick of success when you're a multi-year starter in college and then trying to go to the pros. Yes, I've talked to some draft experts, even on my own podcast, about he does lock on a little bit. Sometimes he doesn't get through progressions. But every time I see that argument come out there, I see another draft person come out there with film study, and it's like, well, look at this. He completely goes through his progressions. And to go on what Tony says, if Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson's the first read and they're open, I mean, you're really not hurting yourself by going to him. I mean, yes, Justin Fields had a couple of step backs this season in terms of some of the decisions he made, but you could also predicate that by saying no spring, no traditional summer. You don't have the opportunity to work out with the guys as much. Maybe there just were some things that were not mechanically right because of that. But, I think that putting Kellen Mond ahead of Justin Fields is either clickbait garbage, laughable, or idiotic. I mean, just one or a combination of the three, because I watched a good amount of Kellen Mond and I was never impressed with him. And I've always been very careful. I don't trash amateur kids, but he's getting ready to get in the draft. So the hell with that. He's not very good.
Jack Cohn?
Yeah, I just suffice to say,
he deserved it. He said something about my mother once.
Go, Tony, if you had something, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
My only thing is, again, we watched Fields for what it was, 20 games or however many total games it was. And I'm pretty content in believing and thinking he's going to be a good NFL quarterback. Is he going to go in and be a Super Bowl winner in his first year? Probably not. Does he need really good coaching, somebody who can bring him along and be alongside good players? Yeah, everybody needs that. The quarterback is a function of everybody around them. And what's unfortunate is, like, Joe Burrow gets put into basically an untenable situation with a very poor offensive line and a wide receiver group that's kind of in flux, and those kind of things, and a team that's just not any good. And yeah, it was a little bit of a freak accident. The way that he got injured, it wasn't necessarily because the offensive line was terrible, but in some regard, again, it puts him in a tough spot. So I think you have to come back in 3 to 5 years and assess, what somebody did they back up with where they were drafted and those kind of things. But I am pretty content in believing he's going to be a good NFL quarterback. And again, this is what these guys get paid to do, is make these assessments. I'm talking about the clubs, not necessarily Kuiper and Todd McShay and everybody else. But it's just fodder for the grist mill right now is all it is, and something to get the hot stove league burning. I don't worry too much about it.
In addition, yeah, go ahead, Tony.
Well, the Chris Sims thing, where I saw the same thing Kevin did, where somebody was giving him props like, hey, Chris Sims, he got Pat Mahomes right. And it's like, well, it reminds me of a time I was like 5 years old. Me and my brother were out shooting BB guns. And, first time I ever shot, I went to point up near and I shot a bird out of the sky. All right. I'm not a dead eye. That was just pure luck that I was able to hit a bird with one shot out of the air. And getting Pat Mahomes right, he was the second quarterback drafted in 2017 behind Mitch Trubisky, and only one team had Mitch Trubisky as the number one quarterback in the draft. So I'm guessing more than just Chris Sims had Pat Mahomes rated very highly in the NFL draft. It's just the teams drafting where they were maybe didn't need a quarterback at that time. So let's not go overboard on saying he was the only one who thought Patrick Mahomes could be a good quarterback. But I just the Kellen Mond thing, I understand why he likes Zach Wilson, because he sees a lot of Mahomes in there, and I'm sure we all do. But I don't know how you can look at the bad of Kellen Mond and then look at the bad of Justin Fields and not see more from Mond and look at the good from Justin Fields and look at the good from Kellen Mond and see more from Kellen Mond in either way. And so, yes, I would dispute him on that as the resident guy who always gets quarterbacks wrong, but I'm okay with that.
In addition to all the obvious physical skill set that Justin Fields brings to the table, which is, again, obvious. You guys talked about it. I still remember Tony describing how the ball comes out of his hand, how it whistles through the air, you guys just knew there was a different dude on the field at the first time you were on the same practice field with Justin Fields, and we saw it. We saw it play out. So in addition to all the physical stuff, the two things that make me trust in Justin Fields performing at the next level is, number one, he's a really intelligent guy. And I think he's also got enough humility in him that he's going to be coachable. So he's going to learn. And then number two is what I saw when the Big Ten season was in jeopardy and how he led a charge and fought to get on the football field. And then once he did, when the biggest game of his life was in front of him, and people are going to argue the Alabama game then came the next week. Well, let's focus on what the Clemson game meant to him and meant to this team that he had been shooting for all that time. And a lot of people, and this is not a criticism to a typical athlete that would be gunning for that type of stage and that type of retribution, would then maybe build that up to be too much and would freeze in the moment. He lit it up like nobody expected, and he took a shot to the ribs that screwed up his ribs and hip for the rest of that game and still delivered. So he's showing me intelligence, guts, and leadership.
And he's prototype height, arm, athleticism, and but did you see him against Indiana? He has flaws.
I saw him throw 3 bad passes against Indiana, but I think he chucked it about 30 or 35 times in that game.
Again, if these scouts and people out there don't, they need to have something to talk about. I mean, that's so, it is what it is. And, as I think it was Steve who said, check back in a couple years and then we'll kind of know where we were and everything on this. But, if I'm an NFL front office and I'm looking for a quarterback, and we get to 4 and Justin Fields hasn't been picked, I'm looking at what I can do to get him there if I need a quarterback, because I think he's going to be pretty special. To echo something I do remember Steve saying, is he going to probably lead a team to a Super Bowl year one? Probably not, but I don't think that teams that are that close to getting to the Super Bowl are going to be picking in the top 5-7 picks or whatnot. But pass on them at your own risk is what I'm saying. I mean, there's a team like Cincinnati doesn't need to go after that. They need to get somebody to protect Joe Burrow. But there are a lot of teams out there that have some serious flaws at quarterback, and Justin Fields is somebody that you can put in there, especially if you don't have to throw him out there into the wolves immediately, that I think that could lead your team for quite some time.
Plus, as we know, Joe Burrow is afraid of competition, so he would just quit.
More than likely.
I'll go back to the same infield draft that Tony brought up in 2017, 4 years ago, and bring up another quarterback, Deshaun Watson. And during the same process in which he ultimately was drafted 10 spots lower than Mitchell Trubisky, I was thinking the whole time, okay, I keep hearing all these criticisms, and I'm not a scout. I just watch a lot of football, but I'm not anything close to being a scout. But man, didn't I just see that guy 2 consecutive years take on most likely the best defense in college football and lift inferior would be a lesser talent past an Alabama defense and put up 40 and 45 points and 500 yards of total offense and pull out the game the second time, and he just made the throws and the plays.
Yeah. He was my guy, and I'm a Bears fan, so – but we might get him in the offseason. We'll see. I'd be more of a Bears fan if they had him. Let's just say that.
We'll see what kind of fan you are when they have to trade away the farm to get him or whatever. We see a Herschel Walker type of trade in that situation.
David Knight is insistent on making a similar super chat contribution analogy to Justin Fields against Clemson, basically, is what he's shooting for here. David, thank you so much for the contribution. We appreciate it so much. David called me a couple weeks ago asking about John Bronkington. So we can pass this on. Could John Bronkington have been a top 10 NFL rusher if he was able to avoid knee injury? So for you who are not old timers, John Bronkington was, I believe, I remember reading at some point, and it's stuck in my head, that he was the first NFL running back in history of the league to either rush for 1,000 yards his first 3 or it might have been 4 NFL seasons, going from the Ohio State Buckeyes to the Green Bay Packers in the early 70s, and won himself a national championship. So, man, I'm going to leave it up to you three about John Bronkington. And David, thank you again so much for the generosity.
Yeah, I'll say, of course, I was born about the time he was playing for the Buckeyes in 1968, so I have no firsthand knowledge, but everything I've ever read and ever been told was he was just a dynamic athlete, and that Woody Hayes obviously saw the benefit in getting the ball into the hands. It was kind of a thunder and lightning combination that they had there back at that time. I mean, Jim Otis was kind of the I think he was the thumper, and Brockington was kind of the lightning part of that, and they had other guys as well that were part of those championship teams. Of course, Rex Kern as the quarterback, he was a little bit of a runner as well. So, I think that they had some great players in that stretch, and could he have been even better? Well, certainly. I think you think about guys who've gone to the NFL, like Gale Sayers' career cut short because of injuries. I think Brockington probably along the same way. Green Bay, that was kind of like after the circus had left town. They were great in the 60s, but the 70s not quite as much there as they were moving toward the mid 70s. But certainly he could have had a great NFL career. And again, he's spoken about in hushed tones in Ohio State lore, just because of everything he was able to do playing for those Woody Hayes teams that won so big back then in the late 1960s. But yeah, he was a special player, no doubt about it. And I think, again, kind of an early forerunner, I think, to a lot of the type of offensive threats that we've seen, come about here in the last, 30, 40 years, I would say.
Yeah, his rookie year was the year I was born, so I didn't have the opportunity to see him really play. I mean, his NFL career went through 77, so I would have been about ready to turn 6 at that point. So not a lot of memories at that point, but everything that I've read about him, I certainly think that he was a back for his time, and he would have, if he would have been able to remain healthy and everything, I think that he certainly could have, been up there, with the great backs of his era. I mean, I think that as you look at any major professional sport, you have, it's not like baseball as much of where you're like, this is the dead ball era and this is the live ball era. I think we go through generations. I mean, how do you compare running backs who were playing in the early 70s to running backs that you saw in the 90s or the running backs you're seeing today? I don't know how you do that, but I'm just basing this on things that I've read and talked to people, since I don't have any firsthand witnessing of his play. But I don't think David's far off in what his statement is.
I was just reading his sports reference page, and he's listed as a fullback. And as Kevin's talking, the difference between a fullback back then and a fullback today is completely different. Fullback back then was just another ball carrier. Now it's a quasi offensive lineman / third tight end. And, well before my time, but anytime you start out with 3 years of 1,000 yards rushing, that's what it takes. But then you think how many guys lost their careers, ended with like an ACL or whatever back then, just because the medical advancements weren't there yet. And it was just that's, well, you play until your knee blows out and then you're done. And then you have a limp the rest of your life until maybe you can get a new knee later on. But yeah, just another one where so many guys, you wonder what could have been if not just for a random injury in a very violent sport where seemingly everybody was trying to kill you back then.
And again, 1,000 yards, 3 consecutive seasons right out of the gate. And I'm almost positive, again, that was an NFL record at the time. And one of the reasons that was so difficult is they only played 14 games, and they were only a few years removed from only playing 12 games, which I think took us through 1965, I believe, is the year that they went from 12 to 14 games, then into the Super Bowl era. AFL, NFL 66, and then the AFC, NFC, and the merger in 1970. And you bring up fullbacks. John Brockington basically took over for, I believe, Jim Otis, who was the primary back for that 68 championship team, and Brockington for the team that some would award a national championship in 1970 despite a Rose Bowl loss. That was his big year that vaulted him into the NFL with 1,000 yards and 17 touchdowns for the Buckeyes in 1970. And hey, back then, 25 receptions for a career in 3 seasons. That was pretty good stuff. Don't show Woody that stat. He might turn over in his grave.
Yeah, I remember back then,
back 25 times.
One of the years, Fred Puggett Sr. led the team in receptions with 9. Although, hey, 2011, Ohio State leading receiver had 14 catches. Now, there are 3 of them.
And it was a clown show.
Yes.
I mean, somebody told me that. I think his name was Urban Meyer or whatever. Called it a clown show.
was that the Jake Stoneburner? Like every other catch
Philly
was
Brown,
a touchdown year.
Yeah, Stoneburner, Philly Brown, and Devin Smith, I believe, were the.
I think Stoneburner was like 14 catches and like 7 or 8 touchdowns.
That's a guy who I thought he could have been really great, but again, playing tight end at Ohio State, how great will you end up?
Yeah, John Franks has become close to the gold standard there, who turned into a 2-time Super Bowl champion.
I think Jeremy Ruckert will get there this year.